Good morning. Welcome to Wednesday and the Silicon Slope Show. A lot of things happening. First and foremost, the NHL is coming to Utah, and you're invited to come celebrate tonight at the Delta Center. It's a free event. It'll start outside the Delta Center Plaza at 4 p.m. with live music, 4-on-4 hockey, street hockey, face painters, and more. And then the party will continue inside, where fans are invited to enjoy hockey-themed activities and complimentary J-Dogs and Coca-Cola products.
Coca-Cola.
Who wrote that? Complimentary J-Dogs and Coca-Cola products. I wonder if they had to say it like that.
Probably. Coca-Cola probably paid a bit.
Why can't you just say soft drinks or drinks?
Well, because Coke's
Why can't you do that?
Brand it.
Why didn't you do that?
Well, I think Coke.
The first five... Okay, stop trying to defend it. It's crazy enough as it is. The question itself is nuts. The first 5,000 attendees to enter the Delta Center will receive a voucher for 2 free tickets to a 2024-2025 preseason NHL or Jazz game at the Delta Center. And then the big event at 5:30 inside the Delta Center. You'll hear from Ryan Smith, Ashley Smith, head coach Andre Torghini. I need to figure out how to say that. I did not say that right, did I?
Close enough for now.
Along with introductions to players that will be on Utah's roster. So come early. Seating is first come, first served. Go to NHLinutah.com/events. How about that?
Fun day.
Joe Vogel's here. This is very exciting. How are you?
I'm doing good. Good to be here.
Tell us about yourself. Obviously, I think you even host a show, if I'm not mistaken, inside of this exact
You
studio.
guys graciously let us use this space. It's been amazing. We've done about 10 episodes so far.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you are the founder, CEO of the Timpanogos Hiking Company. Tell us how that came to be.
Well, it's kind of a crazy story. I was a professor on the East Coast in Massachusetts.
What was your study? I couldn't see where you got.
So I taught literature and film.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah. So I did my PhD at the University of Rochester. So I was out there for about 7 years. Then I was in Massachusetts for about 8 years. And that was really the trajectory that I was on. You know, I was writing books. I was presenting at conferences. I was kind of on that track. And then during the pandemic, both of my parents who live here, live in Mapleton, they had some serious health issues. My mom had a serious brain injury. And it kind of rocked my world, you know, like everything was put into perspective in terms of what mattered most to me and you know, the people that I wanted to spend, you know, the time that they had left with. And so I started Timpanogos as a kind of side project. I'd always been kind of entrepreneurial with my books and things. And so I started it online. And about 3 or 4 months in, I'm like, okay, we kind of have something here because it was getting traction. It was all online at that point. It was on Shopify. But about at the 6 or 7 month mark, I was visiting out here in Utah, and I was kind of intrigued by downtown Provo. And I saw a store that was, you know, that was open for rent on University Avenue. And I was like, sometimes you got to take leaps in life. So I got the store, left my life in Massachusetts, moved across the country, and started this business.
So that's kind of a crazy decision, is it not? Like
It is.
You probably worked, almost 15, 20 years to get the position you were in out there?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like part of it was, you know, I really wanted to move back to Utah because of the family issues. But realistically, if you're looking for a position in your specific field, and especially at a place like Utah where you only have so many universities, you could be waiting 5 years. Mm-hmm. So I was looking, for positions in Utah, but they weren't opening up. And so, you know, I didn't want to wait that long. And so, you know, I'm teaching a class at UVU, just kind of keep my foot in the door a little bit and I still love teaching. So that's still fun for me. Like, for example, next fall, I'll be teaching a class on the 80s. That was kind of one of my favorite classes that I taught out in Massachusetts, like 80s literature and film, right? You get to watch like Back to the Future and like, read It by Stephen King and Handmaid's Tale, stuff like that. So
This
I
sounds
still,
like a great class.
it's so much fun, and I still love that. I really, like some people think when I left that life behind, it was because I hated it and I was burned out. But that really wasn't the case. I love teaching. I love writing. I still do writing. But I have to say now, being in the entrepreneurial world, starting a business, that's a lot of fun too, and there's a big draw to building something with no ceiling,
Yeah. That is kind of the beauty of entrepreneurship. It's kind of like the sky's the limit,
right?
but you got to determine how high the sky is.
Yeah, but it was crazy. I admit that.
So, you buy this. Did you know what you were going to call the shop? Did you know, so when you bought the storefront, by the way, what interests you in downtown Provo? Because it is a little hidden gem here in Utah.
Yeah, I was born in Provo, but downtown Provo was not like this when I was growing up. And I've been, when I was 7, we moved to California, so I spent some time there. And then, like I said, I've been on the East Coast for about 15 years. And Provo, first of all, I know it gets a bad rap, but it's actually a pretty amazing place. I mean,
I have no idea why it gets a bad rap. I mean, it's like the mountains are 2 minutes away.
The mountains alone,
It's incredible.
I still can't stop looking at them, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, we can drive straight down University, hit Provo Canyon, be up at Timpanogos, you go to Rock Canyon. I mean, it's just, everything's so close. And then the downtown itself is awesome. You got a bunch of restaurants, you got a bunch of independent businesses. You guys are here. I mean, it's actually a destination now. It's actually a pretty fun place. So, and to be honest, I have to say, there are a lot of Utah cities that are newer and just, they don't have the character, right? And I like the character of downtown Provo. So,
yeah.
You've got a little Billy Goat.
Yeah.
And obviously the shirt. So ultimately, Timpanogos Hiking Company, what do y'all do?
So the idea is this. We are thinking about people that just want to get out for a day hike, right? We're not necessarily for just the hard, people that this is their whole life and they're hardcore and we're just about our motto is escape the noise, right? And a big emphasis for me, especially coming out of the pandemic and going through some of those difficult things, is mental health. So escape the noise. That's what we're about. And so it's just thinking, if somebody were to go for a day hike, obviously they want a shirt, a water bottle, sunglasses, a hat, just these kind of basic things. And that's, at least as a starting point, that's what we offer. And then, a few plush goats too.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, the goats are sweet.
I have never climbed Timpanogos. Have you, Clint?
Yeah, I have.
That's kind of weird and embarrassing.
It's okay.
Probably need to get that done.
Well, if you grew up down here, as we did, so I was born in Provo too. I live in Mapleton right now, so we have a pretty similar geography. You kind of had to. It would be weird if you didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of a rite of passage, right? Yeah.
By this time next year, if I haven't climbed it, I'll give Clint Betts $100 on
Okay.
air. So
Yeah, okay.
got to make it accountable.
Joe's like, I don't care.
Yeah. I mean,
So
we do have the badges.
Yeah. Let's talk about those badges because you can gamify and incentivize anything in life. And getting out, getting some exercise, enjoying the creations of the natural world, clearing your head. That's good, but sometimes little badges and incentives might work as well. Explain what the decision was on how to do those and what is going to be the ultimate result.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the starting point is exactly what you said. We just want to get people outdoors, do something fun. It also, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but it brings people to our store. But here was the starting point for that. When I was starting this business, I was just reading all things about Timpanogos. And I found that back in the day, they had this really cool tradition where they'd give people badges for reaching the top. And this started in 1930, right? So from 1930 to 1971, they were giving people badges for reaching the top. And it was just this fun tradition. And what we found is that people had their collections, it was really cool. People came into our store and they had, one guy had the whole set. He had all 41.
Oh, wow.
And it was amazing to see it. And they were really proud of it. And they were really happy that we brought the tradition back, you know? So for us, this was the concept. Basically, if you hike to the top of Timpanogos, you take a picture, you tag us online, so we get a little publicity out of it.
Sure.
And then you have to come into our physical store to pick it up, but it's free, right? So it's good for us because, you know, people see our store and they get some exposure to us, but it's also kind of a way for us to give back to the community and just do something free and have a cool tradition.
Yeah. And you've expanded to 10 peaks, right? And then the why?
So yeah, we're, I guess this will be like my official announcement. We're going to do a press release here in a couple of days, but we've expanded it to 10 peaks along the Wasatch Front. So basically from Ben Lomond up in Ogden down to Nebo. And then we also included Kings Peak. So it's going to be,
cool.
it's going to be really, really fun. We've already, you know, kind of talked to some people and there's some buzz around it, but yeah, it's again, it's just people are doing this anyway, but it's a way to commemorate a meaningful experience, right? Because some of these, like when you hike Timpanogos, like, you know, it's a legit hike. That's, you know, 8 to 10 hours, maybe longer, depending on, you know. So it's meaningful. And when we've talked to people that come into our store and get their badges, they've overcome a lot of things like injuries or personal things. And so it's just something to kind of symbolize what that meant to them.
Very cool.
It's the best mountain in Utah, too.
It is.
Everything's always the best if it's in Utah County for Clint.
No, it's genuinely the best mountain, and it's in Utah County, yeah. So what?
Fine. It's a retail location, right? As you mentioned, but also selling online. I'd be interested in like what the learning curve was for you on both, because they're kind of two different skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, so we have a physical location, but we are still primarily online. It's like 80 to 85% of our sales are online, and we've actually been able to kind of brand ourselves in a way where we're kind of a national brand. So about 70% of our audience is outside of Utah, actually. Wow. And I think for them, Timpanogos has a kind of resonance like Patagonia or Cotopaxi has a cool sounding name. You know, we have a bunch of different designs that just appeal to everyday hikers. So you know, there's been a learning curve online for sure. Just so many apps that we've tested. Some have worked, some haven't. Shopify is great, so I've really enjoyed that platform. But you know, everything's a learning curve. With the physical store, it's kind of funny actually. I had never created a store before. You know, I mean, this was a totally new experience. If I showed you a picture of the store, it's just this completely blank canvas, and it's like, okay, what do we do with this, right? And the funny thing is, I actually approached it similar to the way I would approach writing a book, which is thinking about the audience, right? When they walk into the store, what's the first thing I want them to see, right? That's like your hook, like that's your introduction in a book. You know, what do I want the journey to be, right? When they're walking through the store, like how do I want that experience to? So that's really like when I was conceptualizing the store, it was just thinking about the audience and like, what are they seeing when they're walking by? What do they see when they first walk in? Where, you know, if they look that way, or if they look around. And we actually did, I think, a decent job. And I'm sure there's people, you know, that are more professional that could, you know, critique this and that. But like when I look at it now, especially because we're about to hit our 1 year mark as a physical store, it's pretty awesome. You know, it turned out pretty well. And so, you know, we had to get creative. I bought a ton of stuff on Facebook Marketplace, you know. So we did it on a shoestring budget. And there were tons of things that I wanted to do, including like a 3D Timpanogos in the front. Like I want to get that's still in the plans, but with the budget we had, that's what we did.
I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very cool. It's tough to beat New Yankee Workshop, This Old House, and MASH, but one of the shows that can do that for me is Stranger Things. And you wrote a book, Stranger Things in the 80s.
Yep.
And I just got it on Audible today.
Nice.
Looking forward to listening to it. That could be part of your course, right? But what was it like writing that based on the show and based on having lived in the 80s?
So much fun. You know, I was a kid in the 80s. All of that stuff is really fun and appealing to me. Like I said, I've taught a class multiple times in the 80s. when Stranger Things came out, I was like, I swear they made this show for me.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like everything that I love packed into one show. And then the fun thing was my kids were right at the age where they could enjoy it too. So it was the first thing that I'd written where like my kids were actually kind of helping me. You know, we were like watching the shows together and trying to pick things out. And being the good parent that I am, I'd given them a crash course on 80s movies, so they kind of could see some things like, oh, that's like E.T., right?
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of fun. And man, the Duffer Brothers are just so smart. Just even when you watch the opening title, right? The kind of flickering, like the VHS kind of quality of it, just the attention to detail is so amazing. I just had fun writing that, and I think that's been kind of with a lot of my writing projects because I was based in 20th century pop culture film. I get to do a lot of things that people are like, wait, that's your job? You get to do that as a job?
Yeah, it's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, we got our guy wearing a Minnesota hockey hoodie here, and you wrote a book about Prince.
Yeah.
From Minnesota. What made Prince so incredible? Why was he such an icon?
Prince was 100% unique. Like there was just nobody like him. He is a totally underrated musician. I think people now are starting to realize like incredible guitarist, but he could play like 10 or 12 instruments, right? So like his first like few albums, he was playing everything, producing, he was doing the whole thing, right? I think that even the way he presented himself, there's this famous story where he opened for the Rolling Stones. This was like early 80s before Purple Rain and all that, right? Mm-hmm. And people were like throwing bottles at him, like people were not feeling it, because he was weird, like he was a weird artist. He was eccentric, he was androgynous. And so that Rolling Stones audience was just like, nope.
Yeah.
But I think the 80s was a weird decade, and like there were a lot of eccentric androgynous artists, and so he caught on, and there was a period there where he was probably the biggest artist in the world.
Yeah, for sure he was. Yeah, he was an incredible. There's a guitar solo that I watch every once in a while of his that's just mind numbing.
Yeah. Is it the Hall of Fame one?
I think so.
Yeah,
where he's on with
George
a bunch
Harrison.
of other. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's like the greatest thing I've ever seen. And then you also wrote about Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Did those two ever interact, Prince and Michael Jackson?
They did. There's some funny stories about them because they were very competitive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like there were all these rumors in the 80s that they just hated each other because they were kind of different. Like I think people forget. In the 80s, like when Thriller and Purple Rain were like dominating the charts, Michael was actually seen as like the wholesome Disney kind of, that kind of guy. And Prince was like this edgy, like parents wouldn't let you buy his album kind of thing. So, and yeah, there was a little friction there, but there was also like a deep respect, like just for each other's artistry. And so there's one story about them like playing ping pong together, and like apparently,
can you imagine?
Apparently, Prince like kicked his ass, and like it was like, so there's some really like funny kind of stories between the two, but they were both phenomenal, unique artists.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. And then, if I'm not mistaken, you've also written about James Baldwin, a great author.
Yeah. So the theme, I guess, when I was all in academia, is I was doing a lot of work in the 1980s. And with James Baldwin, he was actually known kind of a post-war author, like 50s, 60s. He wrote this great book called The Fire Next Time during the Civil Rights era. But the last year of his decade was the 1980s, and I found some pretty amazing material that he wrote in that decade. One thing actually was at the Harvard Library and isn't even published. And so I got to go to Harvard and dig into this and read it and write a chapter of the book specifically on that. But yeah, he's a phenomenal artist, and it was a phenomenal writer, and it was a way for me to kind of stay in this ballpark, but also kind of show a different side of a phenomenal writer.
Was he in Paris when Hemingway and all those folks were out there? Because I know he moved to Paris at some point.
He did, yeah. It was after
It was after
Hemingway, Fitzgerald, those guys were
Okay.
over there. But it was still at a point where a lot of American authors, so like Norman Mailer was over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was meeting a lot of people.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
What are the similarities between writing a book and starting and operating a business? Because you've got writer's block, and then you've got impediments and roadblocks with starting a business. What are the differences and what are the similarities?
I think the similarity, and I think the most, I don't know, I guess natural thing for me when I did the kind of crossover is storytelling, branding, like just, again, thinking about what's the essence of who you are. Like when I was thinking, okay, I want to be a purpose-driven brand, what's the purpose, right? And so I had to think of something that was authentic to me, and it was the mental health piece. It was escape the noise. So that part came pretty naturally. I think the hard part is when I was writing a book, it's very contained, right? Like there's not a lot of, there's not a big budget. It's just you're working on a project, right? And I could just lock myself in my office and get it done. With a business, I just feel like there's like 1,000 things that you have to keep in your head all the time, and then you do need money. I mean, this is our biggest challenge right now, right? Is like we're growing, but it's like we have no money, right? So it's always this question of like, how do you keep growing when you have no funding, right? And that was never a challenge I had with a book, because a book you get in advance and like you just start writing, and then it goes out in the world and it does what it does, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge for me. And also I'm naturally, I can turn it on and, be more extroverted, but I think naturally I'm more introverted, and I like to just kind of stay in my creative space.
Yeah.
And with a business, you have to kind of force yourself out of that a lot, and you just have to, network and meet people and do all these things. And so that can be fun, but it can also be exhausting.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Real quick, some interesting news, and this is something that Silicon Slopes has worked on over the years here in the state of Utah and now nationwide. The FTC has recently enacted a nationwide ban on most non-compete agreements. So the ban prohibits employers from entering into new non-compete agreements with any workers, including senior executives, after the effective date, which is typically 120 days after being published in the Federal Register. Existing non-competes are only enforceable for senior executives who are making over $151,164. Do you ever wonder how they come up with these numbers? 150, that's such a specific number, 151,164. Existing agreements with all other workers are no longer valid. So if you have an existing one of those and you're making over that number, then it's still enforceable. No new ones of that kind can happen.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's stop there because there's other things, but what do you think of it?
Yeah, I would weirdly tend to agree with the FTC on this one. I do think it will open up more entrepreneurial endeavors. And I always thought the whole thing was weird because there's all sorts of workarounds around it to begin with. And you can still have, non-disclosure agreements with these folks. But, somebody that has to go sit on the sidelines for a year or 2 years, it always just seems so weird to me.
It is super weird. And beyond that, it's, for me, it's like if you're working at Jimmy John's and you've signed a non-compete and something happens and then you can't go work at Subway.
Yeah.
What the
No
heck?
good. Yeah.
We got to stop that.
Because if you're working at Coca-Cola, to bring them up again, and you know the recipe, there's argument to be said of like, well, geez, we can't have that guy just go over to Pepsi. But again, you can have like non-disclosure agreements and all of those things. And those cases are so rare. There's been all sorts of instances with friends and people that we know where they're just sitting around for a year. And I don't know how much impact that 1 year makes.
Yeah. I like it. So the rationale is the FTC believes non-compete stifle competition by limiting worker mobility and innovation. I believe that too. They argue that these agreements suppress wages and hinder new business formation. The impact, the ruling is expected to make it easier for workers to switch jobs and negotiate better salaries. and the FTC estimates it could lead to thousands of new business startups each year.
Yeah.
That's cool. So it could lead to a lot more entrepreneurs. Now, big business isn't excited about this, as you might imagine. Business groups are now racing to block FTC's ban. This is in the Wall Street Journal this morning. The nation's biggest business lobbying group and a national tax service firm both sued the FTC on Wednesday, igniting a flare of lawsuits over the agency's regulation aimed at ending non-compete agreements. The United States Chamber of Commerce, which is the nation's biggest business lobbying group, challenged the regulation in federal court in East Texas, while the tax firm Ryan LLC filed its lawsuit in Dallas. This could temporarily pause what they enacted yesterday so that non-competes are still enforceable. And if these groups win, this could all go away.
Yeah, lots of lawsuits. Like,
Chamber of Commerce is not your friend. United States Chamber. Let me be clear.
they're good at those lawsuits, because we've had a couple of candidates running for attorney general, and the argument could be made that this is something that should be settled on a state level. But this seems like a good question, for those folks running for attorney general, where they stand on this. It's just funny. There's always two different opinions, and then you got to settle it in the courtroom, and everyone's just sitting here waiting. Like, what do you want us to do? We don't really care either way, but just let us know.
Yeah. California has had no non-competes for a long time, and I think that's one of the reasons why Silicon Valley was so great.
Yeah.
Because you really could kind of go around and...
Yeah, I mean, that's all the stories of any of these ecosystems is they were there and then they were here and they started something.
Yeah.
Really it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What do you think about non-competes?
I'm wondering, like, at what level, you talked about the Subway Jimmy John's thing. Like, at what level does the employee have to be to, like, to qualify, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it says here, like, you have to be an executive making over 150K.
Oh, okay.
In order for it to be enforceable. But I think even that's if there's an existing non-compete.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, under this rule, currently, like, you could lock anybody up for anything.
Right.
And then you can sue, lock them up, meaning you can't go work in that industry for a set period of time.
Right.
And then if they did, you can sue them.
Yeah.
And
You got to, like, move.
that was actually happening a lot in Utah.
Yeah.
So I love that it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's better for everyone. And the lawyers will benefit with the lawsuits back and forth, but eventually it'll happen.
A great example of this is Josh James, legendary tech founder here in the state of Utah. He sold Omniture to Adobe for $1.8 billion and then went into Adobe for a second. If you know Josh at all, he's not going to work for anybody.
No.
So he leaves and he has a non-compete with Adobe and he can't do anything. And he actually sued Adobe. And I believe he spent like more than $1 million on that lawsuit and got out of that non-compete. But and then he started Domo, which I don't even know if it's similar, if that's why he did it. He may have just done it for the principle of the thing. But yeah, that's an interesting, like, you're going to lock up one of the great entrepreneurs for 5 years.
Yeah. Some of them are not, like, trivial either. It's not like 3 days. It's years.
It's years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always years.
Yep. Yeah, I think it'll be good for everyone. I do. Should we talk a little bit more news?
Yeah.
Interesting. Belgian man was cleared of drunk driving charge because his body makes its own alcohol.
That's cool. So is he perpetually drunk?
I don't think it's perpetually. I think it comes on like any ailment or condition. But
is there a trigger?
I don't know. Well, they said, like, you can mediate it by, like, avoiding carbs and having a more healthy diet. But yeah, that would be a bummer. You're at a important meeting or you're at a family reunion and you all of a sudden start getting a little bit
drunk,
sloppy. Like, what have you mixed with your Sprite? Nothing, I promise. It's just I don't know.
Either a bummer or a great time.
Yeah, I was gonna say
probably a great time.
You don't want to be, like, driving your RV down I-15 with your family.
Well, that would be the scary part, right?
Yeah, you're like, hey, what is this, a race car? Here we go. So I'm sure it's something you got to, like, good thing it's rare, right? There's probably a lot of people that wish they had that.
I wonder if he actually has it. Or if he somehow just got out of a DUI. by saying it.
Everyone could say
It's a condition.
That argument right out of the gate.
It's like my body makes this. Reggie Bush is getting his Heisman Trophy back. He always should have had it back, of course. There were ancient dynamite sticks found in a holiday home in Utah, and they actually set them off.
Yeah, they did.
Imagine being part of that team. It's like, what'd you find? Yeah, we'll be over.
Yeah.
And we're going to blow them up.
Yeah. I reside in Holiday, and the school that my kids go to, they send texts on everything, and they sent a text that there was an evacuation incident, but it's good to go back to school. And it's like, well, okay, cool. And then I saw that this morning, and that's what that was. So they decided to blow it up in place. And man, I wish they would have been my friends and said, hey, we got all this dynamite. I would have said, all right, I'll be right over. And this story would not have happened.
That's awesome. Well, Joe, how do people get in touch with you? How do they learn more about Timpanogos Hiking?
Definitely online, timpanogoshiking.com or timhiking.com. We're on social media. We post stuff all the time on Instagram, Facebook, updates. And then obviously people can come in if they're in Utah to our downtown Provo store on University Avenue.
And how many people do you think this year will get the 10 badges plus the Y?
I'm excited to see. You know, when we did the Timp badge last year, I think I got 500 badges to start. And then an article ran on KSL on the front page, and we ran out in a week, you know, and so then we had to wait like 2 weeks to get more in. And so we're starting with 1,000 this year. I think, you know, we'll see. And then the other ones are 500 each. So I think a lot, and I think definitely the Y is going to be popular. So I got 1,000 of those too. We're working with BYU on that. So yeah, I'm just excited to see. And honestly, it was one of the funnest things last year. Is just having people. It got to the point where people were coming straight down from the mountain, sweaty, exhausted, kind of stunk, but you know, and then showing us their pictures and telling us their stories. So it's just fun because honestly, the downtown store. Especially, so in January we were having renovations, so we were all boarded up, and then February and March are, you know, a little bit dead, and so it's been quiet over there. So I'm just excited now that it's warming up. We're seeing more people coming into the store, and then once we release the news about these badges, I think we're going to have a lot of people there, and so it'll be good.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Before we go, what's your favorite Baldwin essay?
So he wrote, I'll just pick one of the articles that he wrote in the 80s, since that's what I did the book on, but it's called Freaks and the American Ideal of Manhood. Interesting, because we were talking about Prince and the whole androgyny thing. He was kind of dialing into that and kind of exploring what it meant, right, and exploring just the concept of American masculinity and kind of challenging, I guess, some of the old, tired, you know, representations of manhood, and just basically saying, you know, people can be different things, right? Like you can, you know, for him, because he was a gay writer, and you know, at a time when that was kind of very, very taboo, and so he was already in the 60s and 70s kind of challenging what it meant to be a man. And so I think that article is really fascinating, and you know, I definitely recommend it to people.
Unbelievable writer. Everybody should read him.
Yeah.
Real quick, the Silicon Slopes Hall of Fame is back. Make sure you check that out. halloffame.siliconslopes.com. Also, make sure you check out the Masters of Business Creation program at the University of Utah. Go to eccles.utah.edu/NBC. We will see everybody tomorrow. Who do we have tomorrow?
Brendan Burrowman, founder and chairman of the board of Axios VR. It'll be a good one.
We have Brendan tomorrow. So tune in. See you tomorrow.